This episode is going to be about the use of foul language, the use of swearing in private and in public, because in Britain, it's become increasingly acceptable to swear and to use foul language in both the public and private sphere, and it's even creeping into the professional workplace. The argument that's probably put forward is that we're moving forward in time, and these rules around the use of language were just arbitrary and silly rules that didn't really have any meaning, and so why wouldn't you swear? It's up to the individual to choose what they use as language, and so these words don't really mean anything, so why can't they do it? And that's what this episode is going to be about. It's going to be about why the use of swear words is actually detrimental to both the user and the public space. And I'm going to explain why in Britain in 2023, I don't think we should be normalizing the use of swear words, but drawing back on this. So, contrary to the idea that we're progressing away from the prior social injunction of not swearing in the public space, I actually think we're regressing in this sphere of life. I think that what we should be aiming to do is fill the public sphere with lightness and pleasantry so that people are happy to be in the social space. I think that what we're actually doing is destroying that lightness and that pleasantness in the social sphere by normalizing swearing as though it doesn't matter. It's an important issue for Britain when you really think about it, because this country still has a reputation in areas of the world of the British gentleman, this kind of stereotype of a top hat or bowler hat clad man who wears a nice suit and controls his emotions and conducts himself impeccably in the public space. That's an idea of Britishness that people still hold in other areas of the world. And so for our culture to completely shift, to volte face and change the way that we behave completely in such a short space of time, it's something radical for our country and for how we move forward. And so it's something that if you're in Britain as a person, you live here, and you've got a stake in this country's future, this topic should interest you and make you ask the question of where do we want to go with this? So this stereotype of the British gentleman that I've just talked about has been lampooned since about the 1960s. It roughly coincides with the time that Britain's power in the world receded and American power took its place. And the new cultural regime or elite in Britain rejected the idea of the British gentleman, and they have lampooned it through the arts, theatre, TV shows, comedy, and have adopted the opposite, which is to reject the idea of moderating yourself in the public sphere and to actively seek to be vulgar and unpleasant with words and language and action. We can see this in the example of modern art, particularly, where modern art has become something that completely valorizes the vulgar in some instances. I can't remember the name of the artist, but I remember a toilet seat just being the piece of art with the artist's signature on it. So the new norm of the culture and art, which is a representative of that culture, is towards indecency. On top of this, you have American Hollywood, which beams out films to the rest of the world in which cultural norms have been relaxed. People's language is relaxed and they swear constantly. Their dress is more relaxed. They wear things like jeans, and what was priorly seen to be indecent to show, things like extreme violence and horrible actions, are now flooding through the pictures of these films that come out of Hollywood. So there's been a double whammy, so to speak, of the British elite rejecting their past, and also the new American regime and its culture broadcasting out, which is different to that came before it. So the old British culture emphasized moral prohibitions on individual action as a way to bring order to the public space. The new culture does the opposite by comparison. It enthrones the individual and seeks not to create order in the social sphere, but to make the individual the most powerful, and to release all of these prior moral prohibitions on action and behavior. So now, if you're an individual and you want to swear, only you can decide that that's appropriate or not. And if I, as another individual, offer you moral correction in the social sphere, that is completely unacceptable. The only prohibition really is that there can't be any prohibitions on individual action. Anybody who steps forward to, in the interest of another person, correct their behavior is seen to be a tyrant rather than somebody who's seeking the good for another person. We've also rejected the idea that there is a body of wise knowledge that we can draw upon in order to conduct ourselves in the public space and in private as well. To rebuke a swearer now in the public space would just seem odd. If I got onto a bus and some youths were playing music at the back and swearing and drinking or something, and I asked them politely not to swear, I think I would just be roundly mocked, not just by them, but other people would just look at me like I was some kind of weirdo on the bus. The problem with this is that swearing is immoral, and I have an answer why. Swear words are words. And what are words? Words are a sign. It's a sign that we bring forward to try and communicate something that we're trying to signpost to another. Swear words are signposts or signs for something vulgar, something unpleasant, evil almost. So when we swear, we are bringing forth vulgarity and unpleasantness into the world. When I speak forth a swear word, I am speaking unpleasantness out into the world, and that changes the world around me because I have brought forth something indecent and vulgar. There might be many reasons why somebody might swear. It might be out of anger because you're annoyed that something's happened. It might be that you just revel in being unpleasant and you rebel against any idea of goodness, and you seek to swear to shock and to be edgy and to revel in the evil. Or it might just be that you don't understand what you're doing and you're swearing because it's just become normal to you, and you're kind of confused in the mind and you don't really realize that these words signify something, and that signification of that thing is important and that it matters in the social sphere because you bring it forth into the world around you and you change the world in the real time as you swear. So you might be confused about that. Either way, you're bringing forth unpleasantness into the world, and we have a choice not to do this. You can choose to try and moderate yourself so that you use words that are more pleasant to other people, so that they're more gentle on other people's ears, or that you consciously aren't bringing forth something unpleasant into the world just because it's not nice to do that for yourself and for others as well. This is what it is actually to be merciful to somebody else. It's like we all go through life and we all have suffering and burdens and problems. And when we go into the social sphere, if you're going to be merciful to somebody who you know will probably have a lot of problems that they're already carrying with them, do you want to burden them further by using a bunch of unpleasant words that signify unpleasantness and burdening their ears and their spirit by making the social sphere unpleasant to be in and difficult to be around and not uplifting? It's merciful in that scenario to use pleasant words that make their time on this earth a bit lighter and a bit more good and decent. They might gain some kind of a kind of spiritual sustenance from that short respite in that environment that you created, where you were pleasant to them, and that helped lift them a slight bit. So we have a choice of what to do, what world we want to make. And instead, I think that what we should be trying to do is actively create these pleasant places in which we use language in private and in public as well, especially in public when we go out and represent our private sphere to the outside world. When we're in public, I think we should be doubling down on our efforts to create a social space that is pleasant to be in so that it gives people a lift in a difficult world. Words are an action, and actions have consequences, after all. As I've said, you change the world around you when you bring forth a word that signifies something, because you're generating something out of you that then changes the social sphere because other people hear it and respond to it. So your actions have consequences, and you have to decide what those actions are going to be in the short life that you have to live. After all, once you've spoken something out into the world, it's difficult to amend it. It's difficult to change the repercussions especially with other actions that are more serious. It can be difficult to roll back on them. But once you have spoken the unpleasantness out in terms of words in a social space around other people, you can't really take it back. You can repent in a way and try to make an amends for that action, but it's better to start in a decent way and not have to try and make amends for the things that you've said. Ultimately, the question is, how do you and I want to live with the short time that we have been given on this earth? And what do we want our legacy to be? Do we want our legacy to be that we burdened the other people around us when we had the chance to make their lives a bit better and a bit lighter? Or are we going to live in completely self-indulgent lives where we ignore what we're saying and don't think that it matters, and then we get to the end of our lives and just act like everything that we did didn't have any meaning? We have another choice, another road to go down, in which we act and believe that our lives do have meaning because it's true. And unless you're incredibly resilient, which is a great character trait and something we should all try and cultivate, resilience is something good. These words, when they're spoken around you in the public space, will affect you in some way. It will affect your spirit, and it dampens your spirit a little bit to hear like just harshness all the time. You might not even realize it, though. Most people obviously don't realize it, that these words are making their environment harsh, and you have to live in that environment every day. So it affects you. It doesn't just affect other people. It's also making your life worse. And then by creating this environment in which everyone lives in an environment where swearing is just constant, what you're doing is encouraging that environment to grow and to fester and to multiply. And so this is why it's immoral as well, because in that environment, you're tempting other people to be dragged down with you and to become less decent and more corrupted by the language that they use. And this will have a long-term cumulative effect on them and the way that they behave and the way that they feel and their spirit. In the modern world, we're obviously less attuned to this kind of thing because we don't seem to be as aware of the things that can affect us mentally as much, the things that we can do and the words that we use and the actions that we do and how they affect us mentally. We seem a bit disconnected from the reality. And when you think about it, it's natural for all humans to seek social ties and friendship. We all want to have friendships that are fulfilling. And the only way that we can do that is if we are pleasant to be around, and that other people want to be around us and want to build social ties and relationships with us. And so we can't really afford to destroy the social space and to drag it down and corrupt it and bring forth these evil words into it, because we need the social space to survive and to be good in order for us to thrive and live fulfilling lives as human beings. And so the old prohibitions on speech were there to bring a sense of order for the many into the public sphere, so that the public sphere could be enjoyed by the many, and so that we could all live more light and normal lives and not have to be burdened even more by the difficulties of our existence. And you don't have to be on board with the idea of the British gentleman, the stereotype of the British gentleman, in order to see that swear words are not conducive to the common good. And that's not to say that we're not all guilty of it. I myself have sworn in the past, and I occasionally let swear words slip out in circumstances. I'm not saying that by this, that if you adopt this path, that you're going to just change overnight and become this person who doesn't ever swear. It's unrealistic. It's an ideal to move towards, because that ideal is better for our society and for us as individuals if we try and attain it. And if you work and do the long, hard working on your character, you can attain this goal of not swearing in the public space, and therefore make your life and other people's life around you better. The ideal is worth working towards anyway, even if you have falls and slips along the way and you sometimes swear by accident or you fall prey to it. It's a heroic journey that's worth it, particularly because other people around you just won't be aware of it. And that's what makes it difficult and heroic, is that you'll be in constantly environments where other people are swearing without really even thinking about it. And you're going to be the only person there who knows why it's wrong and knows why it shouldn't be done. And so it will take an effort upon your part to not be tempted by that environment and to rise above it. And that's why it's worthwhile as well. The results will be that people will eventually take notice of the fact that you don't swear. I had a story actually where a friend told me that he's the guy in his old office who was known as the guy who never swears. So it's like people did notice, people took notice, and that will have had an effect on them. And so we can make changes in the world if we ourselves act well. If we manifest goodness, it makes a difference. To finalize, I think in Britain today, we're going down the wrong path with the use of words and language. We're veering off onto this path where we just don't care at all about the words that we use when it comes to swear words. And I don't think this is going to be good for our culture in the long run. And it's not. Again, I don't want to raise children in an environment where the environment is just unpleasant to be around. Children are innocent and light, and they should be around a light environment whilst they are growing, so that they can feel safe and so that they are given the environment within which to grow to become well-ordered adults. So you have a vested interest. If you have any say in Britain's future or any desire to influence Britain's future, which you will do whether you like it or not, because I've said your actions and your words have consequences because they change the world around them as you act in them, then it's in your interest and everybody else's that you don't swear. So that's the takeaway from this. We need to go back to having moral injunctions on the language that we use in public, and we have to go back to being a culture that doesn't use foul language, because it isn't bringing goodness into the world. And we want a good space in the social sphere so that we can all live decent and pleasant lives in this country.